bishop because everybody just called him Harry, because nobody would think that anyone could be so pretentious as to wish to be called by their title. I mean, that would be outrageous. And the other thing we had was my former teacher and colleague, Dr. Peter O'Brien, who is a kind of a deeply esteemed scholar, world-renowned scholar. When American and other culture background students came to Moore College, they could not get over the fact that you addressed him by his first name. Of course you do in Australia. You don't call someone Dr. O'Brien. We didn't even award our teachers the title Professor. Pretty much anyone who teaches a kind of creative writing course in a university in America is called Professor. Well, we don't call anyone that. I mean, you're lucky if you're the Prime Minister when you get called Prime Minister, but you're pretty much going to be called Johnny Howard or Malcolm Turnbull, aren't you, by your first name? That's how it's going to be. So, partly I think this is a response to the evils that come with inequality. In fact, I once saw John Howard in the Commonwealth 1 car, and he was sitting in the front seat alongside the driver. And he was making a statement about equality, wasn't he? It's just un-Australian to sit in the back. You've got to sit alongside the working man because you're not better than him. No, he's not just a plaything, and we find that odd. I think that's indicative of our love of equality. And I think it comes from, it's a response to the evils that come from inequality. The hideous crimes of racism abounding in modern history leave us feeling nauseous or ought to. And likewise, few would seriously advocate a return to the systematic, inequitable treatment of women of only a generation ago. It's this feeling of the natural rightness of equality that's behind the greatest statement of equality in the modern era, the US Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths, by the way, watch the theological language here. And where does it all come from? Where does the idea of equality come from in this statement? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Well, notice that the word created is used, and also that we can tell just by looking, because it's self-evident that all people are created equal, all men are created equal. It was apparently an obvious and self-justifying idea, occurring in nature like some biological specimen or a mathematical principle, whose benefits must surely flow if governments have the will to pursue it. The reality is, and I'm up to the point of a confused idea here, I'm sorry that the outlines have come out so small, so I'm sorry if you didn't bring your reading glasses. But the reality is that, as it is commonly spoken of in the public domain, equality is a confused and confusing idea. The very word equality begs the question, equality of or in what? In what exactly is it that human beings ought to be equal or to be held to be equal? Should they have equal opportunities? Or should they have an equality in the distribution of resources? It might make sense for society to provide me with an equality of bus transport or telephones, but what about things like helicopters? An equality of helicopters? Or does equality apply only from one individual to another? Or is equality also held between groups in society? Is that group equal to that group? Or should we hold those groups as being in some way equal? The issue is further complicated when you try to consider the relative needs that some people have, which means that you may have to treat some people unequally in order to produce a different kind of equality. An equality of outcome rather than an equality of opportunity. For example, you may give people with disabilities special car spaces. That is unequal treatment. As Seinfeld once said, the disabled car space is the mirage of the parking desert, isn't it? Right? We got a car space right next to the disabled car space today, Erica. I thought it was the disabled car space and I had a pang of conscience, but then I realised it was the best car space in the entire parking lot. The disabled car space is an example of inequality, but an unequal treatment in order to give disabled people equal access to shopping malls. And this is a fairly straightforward example, but considering the needs of millions of individuals, that make up a society is an enormously complex and fraught exercise. The tax department certainly hasn't mastered it. One further example of the way the pursuit of equality has become confused is the way in which feminists have been divided over how and what feminine distinctives might be maintained and celebrated, allegedly feminine distinctives, while at the same time pursuing equality with men in every sphere of human life. Doesn't mean it's wrong to pursue those, it's just that all of a sudden it becomes a much more complex idea. Can we say, for instance, can we argue that, well, that board really failed because it didn't have an equality of women in it, without somehow then saying that women are distinctively different? In which case, have we compromised our view of equality in that way? Or what kind of equality are we talking about? And this highlights a problem. As a principle, equality equates one human being to another, but it has trouble in recognising the differences between individuals. What's more, equality is an idea that reaches desperately for foundations to stand on. Equality is a quality idea, but it isn't self-evident at all, despite the assertion of the Declaration of Independence. In fact, it took a long time for the country founded on the Declaration of Independence to realise that it ought to include its black citizens and its female citizens in it. Nature most certainly does not confer a self-evident equality on human beings, but rather quite the opposite. And that's why that hymn used to say, the poor man in his castle, the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate. God made them high and mighty and ordered their estate. It seemed that, actually self-evidently, there were different types of people who were unequal, and they made a theological appeal in that hymn, but it just seemed, actually, that there was a deep inequality in the nature of things. In fact, the social Darwinians of the 19th century were able to mount a case from their reading of nature that some races were inherently superior and some were by nature subhuman. I've actually seen a list, and sadly, of course, they put the indigenous peoples of Australia at the bottom, but just above them were the Irish. In case you have Irish heritage, as I do, as probably most people, most white Australians do. And who says who has a place among equals? Who is invited to the table of equality? Leading ethicist Peter Singer certainly questions the natural right of the severely disabled to an equality of life amongst healthy human beings. He's Australia's perhaps leading philosopher at Princeton University, and he has the virtue of being quite honest and open about what he proposes. And he's particularly questions the right to life of the severely disabled. Though many secular thinkers smell something wrong with this, they can only flap about ineffectually in response. Without a real grounding of equality, there is no reason we should prefer it or pursue it, unless there's a pragmatic reason to do so. And so often the arguments that are given for pursuing equality are pragmatic and economic. It's better for a society if we're more equal. We produce more, we use our talent more. But the trouble is, this actually diminishes the actual value of actual human beings, because it says that we're reduced to our potential output. So I think there's something pernicious about the argument that as a society is more prosperous if it is more equal. Because what if it wasn't? What if it was more prosperous and less equal? Then would that be an argument for inequality? I have a problem with that there. It would also be well at this point to point to the fact that while on the face of it equality has supremacy as an ideal, the reality of the world is that it is becoming more unequal, not less. Now that's a complex statement, and I have seen some statistics that argue that in particular in Western societies there is a growing inequality, or that the growing middle classes in India and in China have led to a greater equality across the globe, so we might challenge this idea. But on the whole, I think we must say that we have a taste for inequality and we like it. We love inequality, especially if we are more equal than others. In his book Status Anxiety, Alain de Botton argues that we have exchanged aristocracy for meritocracy, partly because we love to think that we may be better than someone else. Status anxiety comes when we think someone else is better than us, and well, we actually very much enjoy it. There's a deeper pleasure we find in having something, but also having something we know someone else doesn't have. That's a beautiful feeling, apparently. Australians may consider themselves egalitarian, but recent statistics tell a story. 45% of our wealth is held by only 10% of the households, while fully half of Australia's households scrabble only over 7% of the wealth. Women are still massively underrepresented in parliaments and on company boards, and earn on average significantly less than men. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are 10% more likely to be unemployed, 3 times more likely to lose a child in infancy, and have a life expectancy a full 18 years less than other Australians. So some significant examples of inequality even in our society. So I might pause then and ask if there's any comments or reflections before we move on to a more constructive account from the Christian tradition of equality. Would anyone like to add anything?
So who was the quote by? That one?
That was Dworkin.
Oh, we hold these truths to be self-evident.
No, that's the American Declaration of
okay.
Independence.
Thank you.
Yes.
I believe in refreshments equality.
In which?
Refreshments?
You do.
Equality? Do we have?
We don't.
We were all equally.
We're all equally unrefreshed. Which means that you're very free to have a glass of water at the end. Yeah.
So how are we defining equality going forward?
That's my problem. Well, partly I'm saying that's a problem, isn't it? I mean, the problem of definition makes just saying, oh, equality is a good, simplistic at best. And saying that we must have equality of this or equality of that is not self-evidently true. So in what we're created equal in what sense for